Welcome to the Next Level Podcast, powered by San Manuel, a series connecting you with the best minds in casino, hospitality, tribal government, and beyond. Enjoy the show.
Andy Bernstein, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Kyle. It's so great to see you, man. And thanks for asking me to be part of this Next Level podcast.
The pleasure is all on this side. You know, I know you're a busy individual. You run your own podcast. You got the Legends of Sport, the photography business, 40 plus years. You can't really tell the story of the NBA and a lot of sports for that matter without your kind of visual work. Author. I mean, the list goes on and on. The Mamba Mentality, all the work you did there with Kobe. So I think there's a lot to get into, but just to start, thanks for taking some time today to share some thoughts with the audience.
Absolutely, man. Thank you.
So, Andy, I want to start there. Usually we kind of start with this podcast is all about taking people's careers to the next level. Mm-hmm. And I think you're the perfect guest because throughout your career, a lot of common themes that come up around curiosity, innovation, grit. I think speaking with you briefly, you embody a lot of those things. And on top of that, you've seen it at the highest level through your coverage of the NBA and sports in general. So I think there's a lot of value you can add, but I'm going to say Hall of Famer, 40 plus years documenting sports, author, one of the best photographers of all time in the sports live event space, podcast host, Legends of Sport. Going backwards, let's say before the age of 20, what must the audience know about you that made those things possible in your career now?
Oh, that's such a great question, Kyle. First of all, I got to remember that far back, which is not the easiest thing at my age to do. I was a very driven teenager, as I remember. You know, I got introduced to photography when I was 14. My dad bought me a camera, of course, a manual film camera those days. And we made a trip to the Western United States. And I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, so I hadn't been anywhere west of New Jersey at that point. And I really took to photography. I really realized that I could kind of see something in my head through my eyes and translate it down through a camera onto film. And then when I got into the darkroom techniques, I learned all that stuff. And that was like where the magic happened. And so the photography became like a huge passion for me. I also was a big sports fan, and I was able to kind of, bring photography into my sports world a little bit. But that, I come from a very sort of driven, motivated family of people with that New York moxie kind of thing going. And, I've carried that through, my college life, of course, the beginning of my career as an assistant, and then building my career as a photographer. And now, later stage of my career, pivoting a little bit to the left and doing the whole podcast stuff and building up my Legends of Sport platform. So it's kind of, a mixed bag, but mostly I would say my drive, my motivation, and kind of my career aspirations were always at the top of my sort of to-do list.
So how was that perceived if you grew up in New York and, it seems like you have a really driven household, if I heard you correctly? Mm-hmm. When you were kind of serious about, I guess, two-part question. One, when did you realize like photography, this is kind of my lane, this is what I want to do for a living? And two, how was that perceived within your family or inner circle?
Yeah, well, I loved photography. I loved doing it. The big joke in high school was who would come into the room first, Andy or his camera, because the camera was literally attached to me like an appendage. So the passion for photography was there. It wasn't until I actually transferred. I went to the University of Massachusetts. I worked for the daily newspaper. It was really a great experience, but I was not like learning classroom learning kind of, the science of photography, all the techniques, all the great, historical photographers that I had to build my career off of their lessons from the past. Wasn't learning any of that. And I realized I had to ratchet up my sort of classroom training of photography. So I made a big move. I made a bold move in the middle of my junior year. at UMass. I was 19 years old. I moved to California to go to Art Center College of Design, and that really cemented the fact that okay, I took a sort of a dream to become a photographer and made it into a goal, which would be my career. And that was that was around age I was around 19 or 20, and I was exposed and worked for some really great photographers from Sports Illustrated. I could see like, wow, this is what I want to do. I want to be on the sidelines. I want to be shooting these portraits. I want to be traveling and doing all the stuff those guys did. I was learning from the best. So that's when it really cemented that it could be a career. I did have an epiphany moment actually, where I do remember going from like sort of an idea, like okay, or sort of a hobby, to a career goal. I remember driving down Sunset Boulevard, and as you know, Sunset Boulevard is full of billboards, right? And we just sort of drive past them. Nobody really pays that much attention to them. But I started just seeing all these billboards, and every single billboard was a photograph of some kind. It could be a beauty product, it could be for an album, it could be for a car. It didn't matter. And I thought to myself, well, somebody had to take these pictures. I mean, like, there's a business here somewhere. you know
Yeah.
that was a great moment because I was in the right school to learn that. Art Center is a very hardcore, commercially oriented school, and not particularly too hip on somebody like me who wanted to be a photojournalist and, God forbid, a sports photographer, which is what I wanted to do. But that's where I brought the New York moxie into it and just like put all that noise aside. Like, if you tell me I can't do something, of course I'm going to show you I can do it. And that's when it all gelled. So hopefully that answered the question, but it brings back great memories.
Absolutely. It sounds like you were a driven individual. Hence, I think everyone could get that given the stat line I kind of read out at the beginning here. But I guess, so where did, so you moved to California, and I mean, that seemed like a level of risk possibly at that time, right?
Mhm.
Did you have a position within sports? I think you mentioned Sports Illustrated. Talk
Mhm.
to me about that career choice move in the early days of your career. Like, where did you get that foundation that ultimately built you on the road to success where you are today?
Yeah, that was purely an educational move at that point. I was in the middle of my junior year at UMass. I could have finished it out, gotten my communications degree, which was just a general kind of communications thing. Um, but if I wanted to become a real working photographer, I had to first go to a place. I was in Western Massachusetts, in basically the middle of nowhere. I had to go to a city that could foster and help nurture a career as a photographer. At that point, it wasn't really sure I wanted to be a sports photographer, but I knew I wanted to be a photojournalist of some kind. So Art Center, although I wasn't encouraged to follow my passion in sports photography, I did learn lighting and composition and history of photography and every single darkroom technique that I needed to know. And through one of my teachers, I was able to meet these Sports Illustrated guys, and that, again, that put me on the road to where the career path really was. I mean, I saw the yellow brick road right there. This is like where I want to be.
So, kind of what was, because I believe you started, because there's so many iconic imageries when I was doing some research of Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, and all of these key moments in the NBA are from your lens. Kind of
Mhm.
take us through how you got your foot in the door to what was ultimately kind of one of your hallmark pieces of work, which is all the imagery you caught for the NBA.
Well, through this assisting job at Sports Illustrated, I was groomed really by their main lighting tech, a guy named David Keith. I remember him well. Um, I was groomed and taught the very specialized technique of putting these big strobe flash units up in the catwalks of arenas like the Forum or Pauley Pavilion or the LA Sports Arena or other places we used to go. And only Sports Illustrated was doing that. It was a very expensive technique. Um, it required equipment that nobody else really had, and And there's maybe 6 of us in the country who really knew how to do that. And my job was to, if there was, let's say, a Laker game at the Forum tonight, David and I would show up at 9 o'clock in the morning at the Forum, and we'd have all these cases of equipment, and we'd have to work with the riggers there and rope it up to the catwalk and set up all these 4 or 6 strobe units and really heavy power packs, and get it all ready for the photographer who came in at like maybe 1 or 2 o'clock, so that he could test the lighting, and then we could help him get ready for the game, and then help him during the game with changing film and whatever had to be done. And then game ends, we help him pack up, he's out of there. And then we have to reverse the whole thing. We have to take everything down, pack it all up, sometimes go right to the airport and ship the equipment to another city, or ship the film that the photographer just shot. So that was like a 18, 20-hour day, really.
Wow.
But it was a life that I saw. I kind of saw that in my future. I could do this. I mean, I really want to do this. So through that association, of course, I had to meet people associated with the Lakers, the PR people, the operations people at the Forum. The Lakers owned California Sports, which also owned the LA Kings. Hockey is my first love. There were other sports going on at the Forum at the time: indoor volleyball, tennis, soccer, and anything that you could put indoors, they did. And so, the door, I always like to say, like, SI helped to open the door a little bit, like the crack, but it was up to me to stick my foot in and open it up even more, and use those contacts, and show that I was capable of getting to the next level, which was obviously from assistant to photographer. And so I used the moxie again. I was able to foster some deals with the people at the Forum, like, okay, if you give me a credential and maybe you let me put some strobes in for a couple of games, I can produce photography at a level maybe that you hadn't really realized before, because nobody really was doing strobe action photography except SI. And they did. And then my really big break, Kyle, came when the NBA held their '83 All-Star game at the Forum. And I was told, I didn't even know that was happening. It was November of the previous year of that season, '82, '83. And my friend, who was the PR director at the Lakers, said, well, we're having the All-Star game here in February, and maybe they need a photographer, And I said, really? You think so? And he said, yeah, go talk to this guy. And they're in New York. And I was going back to New York to visit family anyway for Thanksgiving. So I made an appointment to see this guy. And his name was Porter McKinnon. He ran the only publication that the NBA did at the time. And I'm sitting across from him, and I have my little portfolio, And he says, so let me understand something. He says, so you live in LA? I said, yeah. He says, and so we don't have to feed you, and we don't have to get you a hotel room, and we don't have to travel you, and you're just going to charge us like nothing, basically. I said, yeah, that's pretty much right. Okay, we'll hire you. He said, he admitted to me, he said, we didn't even think of having a quote unquote official photographer. They never had one before. And that was really the beginning of the snowball that happened with me becoming the official NBA photographer, the first one ever. That was in 1986. I helped to co-create NBA Photos, which to this day is kind of the biggest depository of NBA photography in the world. I've been all over the world with the NBA. You said it in the opening, but this is now my 43rd season. And it just shows that if you have ambition and some drive, some moxie, and you can annoy people to the point where they don't like throw you out the door, but they like say, okay, let's give this kid a shot. then that's a good recipe for hopefully a successful beginning of a career.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is perfect for the audience, and what's so fascinating about your story, and I'm curious to know your perspective, because at that time, because there's so many people in the world of photography,
mm-hmm.
right? Like so many people who are probably really talented and good at it. Maybe it's a hobby of theirs, maybe they do it on the side, but you made it your life's work. And I'm just curious to know, like, just broad strokes here from a macro perspective that applies probably to any career. What separated you? Because when I think of your story, I think of this quote of like, luck is, I think it's preparation meeting opportunity.
Right.
Right. And that sounds like your story. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess what are the little subtle differences that probably apply to any career that you were doing that others were not, that made you succeed in your lane?
Oh, great question, man. Well, I think what I was doing was I was very uh, confident in my ability. I was very driven. Um, I was persistent, but not to the point of being a pest. Um, I I I produced when I said I would produce. I told them at the forum I'll give you really great quality photography, and I did. I came through on that. One of the things I always like to stress, especially to young people when I do teaching, is that I don't really make it. I didn't really make it about me. I made it about them, the client, whoever the client was. I'm going to solve your problem. Okay, you need a little bit better, a higher level of photography, or you need somebody to deliver something on a Sunday morning, or you need whatever it could be. I was willing to do that. But first and foremost, talent has to be the number one um, criteria. There's it could work both ways. You could be a really great photographer, but you could be a lousy business person and somebody who's super annoying that no one wants to work with.
Mhm.
Or you could be a mediocre photographer, but be a really great guy. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to be the best of both worlds. I'm going to try to be a really great photographer, and I'm going to try to be a good guy, but I'm also going to be a really good business person with um, all the integrity in the world. I never want, especially in my world of professional sports, you never want to give them the bad first impression, because you never get a second chance at that, right? As we know, in any business, really. Um, but in my business, it's such a small, like, inner sanctum of trust that if you screw that up, it's impossible. Not hard, but it's impossible to get that back.
Which one was harder for you? So, hearing you correctly, you kind of have these two broad buckets. Like, there's the talent and the photography end, and then there's the connection, like networking. You even said to annoy people, right? So it seems like you had some kind of level of resilience in you to be able to take no. So, like,
Mhm.
which one of those two, whether it's the social component and getting along with people, or just the straight artwork and craft of photography, which one was harder for you to kind of build that skill set up, if that makes sense?
It had to be the interpersonal part, because as a creative person, we're all a little neurotic. I mean, we just are. And I had to, I'm working in a very corporate atmosphere. I mean, you think of professional sport, that it's okay, it's sports, but it's actually a very corporate atmosphere. Even back then, in sort of the free flowing, high flying Showtime era, Dr. Buss ran a pretty tight business over there, and people worked their butts off, and they didn't want to hear complaints, and they didn't want to you didn't want to stand out, really. I wanted to stand out because of my work, my photography work, but I didn't want to be somebody that, if you're coming down the hallway, that somebody turns around, goes the other way. So that was kind of, I don't want to say it was the hardest, but of the two challenges,
Yep.
keeping my photography at the highest level at all times, right? Which has a lot of elements to it. Most of it's preparation, knowing your equipment, and a little bit of luck, of course. But the also the business side of it probably was the more challenging part of the equation.
I heard this quote one time and I want to write it down. Um, it goes something like this. It was another photographer. I can't remember what conference I was at, but it's literally parallel to, I feel like, a lot of kind of your outlook on not only just photography, but life. And it's something along the lines of, I'm going to I'm going to believe it, until I see it, right? Which most people are the other way around. Like I'll believe it when I see it. And it goes back to the comment you made, like I could see it in my head first before the actual probably final output. Like what role has that, maybe you're just that way from Jump Street, which ultimately got you to this creative process, right? But like, I guess what I'm trying to understand is like that mindset that you have of optimism and maybe seeing it and being pretty kind of, if I'm hearing you correctly and getting to know you, like you seem kind of tunnel visioned on, I can see it in my head, I can get there, right? What that mindset that you have, do I have that right? And also part two, what role has that played throughout just your life in general?
Well, I think it all starts with self-confidence. I mean, we all go through periods of self-doubt and all that stuff, which of course, you know, I did because I'm starting off in a very competitive area, in a very competitive business. Um, but I had to, if I didn't have confidence in what I could do and what my work, you know, the level of work that I could produce, if somebody just gave me a chance, um, and I have kind of two strikes against me, you know, getting into the batter's box kind of thing. So I had to keep reminding myself that I have this ambition, that I have this goal. You know, Peter Guber, the great Peter Guber, one of my dear friends and mentors, who really, you know, if you talk about a Horatio Alger story, this guy started with nothing in Boston, and now, you know, he owns the Warriors, he owns the Dodgers, the LAFC, you know, you name it, been a top entertainment executive for 50 plus years. You know, Peter in his book has a great quote. He says, "Dreams plus goals equals destiny." Right? I felt like my dream as a teenager and a young photographer was to be a great photographer, was to just get to the next level with my photography. But then, like I said earlier, when I came out to California and I made that big move and this big conscious move to take it to the next level, at least academically, that dream became a goal. The goal was my career. You know, now, okay, it was a dream, that was great, but the goal now is to actually make this into a career. And now looking back, you know, it's almost 50 years. Was that my destiny? I truly believe it was. I'm not saying it was, you know, a divine intervention, destiny, you know, or divinely mandated. Maybe it was, I don't know. But for me, I needed to take those incremental steps from dream to goal to achieve this destiny of a very long and successful and very fulfilling career.
You know, Andy, you brought up something earlier. You said the word groomed. Earlier in your career, you were groomed. I think it was at SI, Sports Illustrated. A lot of the topic comes up a lot in this show is the role of mentors and kind of that kind of help somebody steer somebody in the right direction, and how that pays off so much more for that individual. And almost every single individual we have in the show has some form of some early influence. I guess my question to you is that grooming that you got earlier in your career, how instrumental was that for you? Like, say that didn't happen, right? Would you be in the position you're in? Just kind of speak to the role of a mentor, or somebody, you know, seeing potential in someone earlier in their career and the role that plays for someone.
It's absolutely vital, at least for me, to have had mentors, um, people that believed in me from the beginning, people that believed in me all throughout my career, continue to believe in me. I'll tell you a story. Very early in my very young career, might have been the first or second year of being a professional photographer. I reached out to the great Neil Leifer. I mean, Neil Leifer is like literally one of the heads on the Mount Rushmore of sports photographers, right? And I emulated him. I worshipped him. I wanted to find out what made him tick. And I wrote him a letter. You know, keep in mind, this is pre-email, pre-cell phone, the whole thing. I got his address through a friend that worked at Sports Illustrated. I wrote him a letter: "Dear Mr. Leifer, I'm starting off my career and blah, blah, blah. I would love to have the opportunity just to meet you for 10 minutes." And he literally wrote me back and he said, next time you're in New York, and you have some time, come swing by the apartment and we can have a little chat, right? I mean, how great is that? So
Yeah.
I did that, made an appointment to see him. It was supposed to be 10 minutes. I was there 2.5 hours in his apartment. Because first of all, Neil likes to talk, but his apartment was literally like the Neil Lifer Museum. I mean, there's like the Ollie over Liston photo over here. There's like the Jim Brown photo over there. There's the Mickey Mantle picture. I mean, it's like literally like going into a museum of sports photography. And I guess, Neil and I have talked about this over many glasses of wine. He saw something in me that he might have seen in himself, 30, 40 years earlier. He wanted to pay it forward, pay it back a little bit in the profession. And he's stayed a great friend. He has been instrumental in my career in so many ways, was a guest on my podcast. We see each other when he comes through LA. Neil is like 80 years old and still working as hard as anybody. And then, I had teachers at school too, specifically Jim Kakavo, who was my documentary teacher, was a Vietnam veteran, was a photographer in Vietnam. I had Bill Robbins, who was my sort of advertising teacher, who took me under his wing, and I worked in his studio and learned like the inner workings of how to do business and run a studio. They believed in me when the school was telling me that I was in the wrong place and why are you here? And we don't promote this kind of stuff, this kind of work that you want to do. And they just kept pushing me forward. They said, look, you got some talent, like just prove everybody wrong, get through the 8 semesters and you'll be fine. And still 2 great mentors and friends in my life, to the point where, I have now taken on that role with young photographers, and I play that role with the NBA as well, where my boss at the NBA will introduce me to up and coming photographers, and we have great conversations, and I review their work, and some of them have actually, moved on to become the next level, as either an assistant or a photographer, and a couple of them have become actual team photographers in the league. So it's very fulfilling to me. I believe a lot in my craft. I want to keep the craft of photography going, especially sports photography. And, just like Neil did with me, kind of sort of, I don't want to say passing the baton, but just like letting me touch the baton, I'm kind of hoping to do that with the next generation as well.
I find, and I'm curious to know your take here, because you've been around so many successful people, not only just within your own craft, but professional athletes. True or false here to this statement I'm going to say, and take it where you want. Generally speaking, successful people want to share the knowledge with others.
I completely agree with that. I scratch my head over the opposite of that. Successful people who don't want to share with others, especially others that are younger. That we all started somewhere, right? So if I can't be an inspiration and a help and a mentor to somebody younger who has admired my work or my career, or just needs some advice, I don't know what purpose do we serve, really.
Right.
It's not just about earning a living and making some money and whatever. It's really about giving back. I totally believe in that. And I think with that has to come, you have to be centered, and you don't have, I guess you have a lot of self-confidence. I mean, I'm speaking about myself. I'm not worried about anybody taking my job away at this point in my career. Maybe the first third of my career, maybe I was always looking over my shoulder, and maybe I was a little standoffish or just private. Now it's like the gloves are off, man. I'm happy to talk to anybody about anything having to do with business or building a career or anything like that, because I feel like that's my duty now to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's just such an important story. The one that you shared in your 2 mentors is just reaching out, right, and sparking that conversation to kind of greater your input to learn from others and have mentors. A lot of it's just stepping up on that ledge and asking and coming at it in a genuine place. And if you are, most of the time, those potential mentors or those people of great knowledge, which you seek to build the relationship with, they can sense that it comes out of an honest place, and you're in so much of a better spot. So Andy, it's actually a perfect segue, because I want to jump to a segment here, which you're no stranger to, which is pictures. We call it the bigger picture. I'll show a picture and we just kind of riff. So the first one here it's a good segue too, because when I think of this story we're talking about mentors, there's a great scene and a lot about Kobe and his relationship with Michael Jordan. Right. And a lot of people at the time were scared of Michael Jordan, and rightfully so, and wouldn't seek his advice on input. And actually, he was pretty tight, from what I understand, about giving info anyways. But Kobe was able to strike a relationship with him because he had put in the work, and he would ask him general questions. And Kobe was like, I'm not scared of him. This guy's arguably the best of all time. Right. He was more curious than most people. And I think that's part of Kobe's success. So what really I want to hit on this slide with is broad question, but this book is amazing, the Mamba Mentality. And I guess a two-part question. First, to start though, I'm just curious to know your relationship with Kobe and just the real quick origin story of how you guys created this book.
Well, you got to go back, Kyle, to the beginning when I first met him. He's 19 years old. This wide-eyed rookie sensation coming right out of high school. It was the 1996 Lakers Media Day, and I had never met him before, but he had a lot of hype coming in, and he's on my set at Media Day, which is a very chaotic situation there anyway. But like any new player or a traded player, somebody I had met before, I'm respectful. I go and I introduce myself before we start shooting. I say, "Hey, Kobe, I'm Andy Bernstein. I'm your team photographer." And he looks me straight in the eye. He's still shaking my hand. He says, "Yeah, man, I know who you are." And I'm thinking, like, that's kind of a smart ass comment, I did say that. I said, I don't know how that's possible because we never met. He said, "Well, I had all your posters in my room growing up." And that just floored me because, first of all, nobody looks at the photo credit on a poster. Okay. Only other photographers look at photo credit because we're all jealous that we didn't get that poster, But for him to have studied every dot of that poster and see my name on it, and then, just be able to have the sort of wherewithal to say that to me was amazing. I was 20 years older than him, and I saw a lot of myself in him at 19. Very driven, chip on his shoulder, confident, wanting to succeed, all that stuff. And that's how we bonded. We just bonded that way. And, it was such a joy to watch his maturation as a player, as a man. He went from a teenager to a man to a husband and a father, and then of course the wily veteran. And it just was an incredible subject, if you want to just call him a subject, to have in front of my lens for 20 years. I mean, it's unheard of. And we just connected on so many levels, especially when he became a dad. And I already had kids, and we could talk about that instead of basketball or whatever, and just life in general. And he trusted me. That was the most important thing. Kobe was very mindful of who was around him all the time, and very conscious of giving out a very small amount of trust to very small amount of people. And luckily I earned that ability and that trust from him. It's not something that he gave; it's something I earned. And so, we got to 2015, and he announces his retirement in November, as you remember, early in the season. And I was getting a little bummed out because I'm thinking, wow, I wish I could retire when he retires, but I can't. So what am I going to do the rest of my career? But on top of that, I'm thinking about all the photography that I had produced of him over the years, like mountains of photography. And a lot of it, of course, was published, but a lot of it hadn't been published. So I went to him with an idea and about doing a book, and he said, "Okay, well, come down, make a presentation to me and my team." I said, "Well, okay, I'm gonna take it to the next level." And you're probably familiar with Taschen Books. It's a very, very high end book company that does these big sumo books. They're gigantic, like you know, the books need their own coffee table to sit on, and that's what I envisioned. This like monumental opus to him, with my photography. So I actually produced a prototype of a Taschen book, if you can believe it. It was all hand printed, hand stitched, the whole thing. And I bring it down to the office in Newport, and we're in the conference room. And it's me, and it's like 4 or 5 people from his team. I know everybody, but and I wore a suit, believe it or not. And and I take this thing out of this beautiful leather cover, and I put it in front of him, and he goes to open it. I said, "No, no, hold on a second." And I took out 2 white cotton gloves, and I said, "No, you have to wear these." And he looks at me like I'm nuts, right? And so he proceeds to open. The book is huge. He opens the book, big, beautiful leather embossed cover, and he starts looking through the pictures and looking, and it was about 40 or so pages, big, giant photos, and he doesn't say anything, right? And I'm like Albert Brooks in Network, like I'm sweating bullets over there. I was like, and people are looking at me like, "You're in trouble." He's not like reacting. What's going to come here? And he, at the end, he did this like, and then closed the book and took a beat or two. And then he looks up at me, and I'm like, I don't know what to expect. He says, "Andy, I got good news for you, and I got bad news for you." I said, "Okay." He says, "The good news is we're going to do a book together. Bad news is not going to be this book." I said, "That's not bad news." I said, "What do you want to do, Mr. Mamba, sir? Because I will do anything, any book you want." And this will show you how great he was as a human being. He knew exactly the book he wanted to do, right? He knew before I even showed up that day what the book was going to be. But he gave me the respect as a person, as a friend, to let me go through this whole presentation because it was so important to me. It was a beautiful thing, really. And that's when he said, "Look," he said, "I want to tell my story, and I want you to illustrate it with your photos." He said, I adopted this moniker, the Black Mamba." He said, "I never really told anybody what that really means. I got this thing called the Mamba Mentality." Again, it's kind of this like crazy term that I've never really disclosed what that means to me. A lot of people speculated, of course, but he said, "I want to tell it in my own words." I said, "And with in my own book, with you illustrating with your photos." And I said, "Great." And that we were off and running. That's how the collaboration started. He was involved in every aspect. He wasn't, micromanaging the project, but he definitely knew what he wanted the book to look like. He wanted the book to be divided into 2 parts. First part is process, which is everything involved in his greatness. So his mental preparation, his physical preparation, how he dealt with injuries, all the practices that he would do in the gym to keep himself, totally as fine-tuned a machine as possible. And then craft, of course, was everything that was basketball related. And there's a million stories, Kyle, but I'll just tell you one that we would one part of the book in the craft part talked about who was like his biggest nemesis on defense, like who played him the hardest, right? And we talked about 3 or 4 guys. The top guy kind of came down to be Bruce Bowen from San Antonio, right? Who just played him really tough every game. And so Kobe's going off on like, "Yeah, you remember the 2002 Western Conference Finals, third quarter is about 3:10 to go on the clock." I mean, this is true. About 3:10 to go on the clock, and I made this move on Bruce on the baseline, fake left, went right, and dunked on his ass. He goes, "You have that picture, right?" I said, well, sure, I'll try to find it, you know. And the biggest challenge, I don't want to say the hardest part, the biggest challenge of doing the book was the fact that half of Kobe's career happened pre-digital. So I had to rely on the NBA's film archive, which is a really comprehensive and very organized film archive. But you know, you can imagine having to go through like hundreds of thousands of photos to find that like needle in the haystack, because this is what he wants to talk about. And we found about, I would say about 95% of the stuff that he wanted, honestly. And then he let me put in a couple of what he called beautiful pictures, quote unquote, that had nothing to do with the Mamba mentality. But he knew that I would want them in our book. You know, like it was important to me to have those photos in there. So
Yeah.
sprinkled in there, you'll see photos that like this really doesn't have anything to do with what he's talking about, but it made Andy happy. And so, you know, he's so gracious throughout the whole process. He did some publicity for the book. The Lakers had a nice book launch party before the first game of the 2018 season. We did a bunch of interviews, you know, and that was that. But you know, now the book, I mean, it was a worldwide bestseller to begin with, but now it's truly taken on a whole other meaning all over the world. Everybody loves it, and it's been translated into I don't even know how many languages, because he transcends sports. His legacy now is the book, which I'm very, very proud and humbled by.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an iconic piece that goes so much farther than just basketball, and you know, it just applies in so many different levels. And something that you said there, I just find interesting. And I'm sure this applies beyond just sports, but this photographic memory, it seems like the elite of the elite have it.
Yeah,
Like so it's Kobe just being able off the top of the head be like 2002, this play. There's a clip, people should Google it if they haven't seen it, of LeBron, and he recalls like 9 plays in a row at this press conference when someone asked him a simple question about a play, and
yep,
it's like bang, 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 and everything was sequential, exactly how he said it.
yeah.
It's just interesting. It seems like the greats all have that sense of like photographic memory, don't you think?
Oh, it's unbelievable. I mean, LeBron he's just on another level of how he remembers stuff. Um, I mean, I was just watching the baseball playoffs, and they were talking to one of the pitchers from the Diamondbacks who remembered every pitch that he pitched this one particular guy throughout the entire series, you know, that he pitched to, I think it was to Bryce Harper. Like, yeah, I'd start him off with this, and then I bring in that, and then I do this, and it was a 3-1 count. And this is like 5 games ago. You know, how do these guys do that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I try to have as much a photographic memory as possible, but at this point in my career, in my age, I'm lucky if I remember like what I shot last night. You know.
It worked out just to close this segment, right? I want to read from the acknowledgments directly from Kobe. Thank you to Hall of Fame photographer Andy Bernstein, who through the years perfected a craftsmanship with his lens that is unparalleled in the industry. One photographer, one athlete, one team, 20 years. Without your work, this story could not fully come to life. So for those listening, like I said, whether if you're a fan of sports or not, I think this is worth a book, and Andy's work is just amazing throughout this piece, throughout this book. The next picture is Hall of Fame, right? I think this is 2018. Andy, it seems like you got a lot of career in front of you, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
I'm just looking at you. You look young. So you're saying all these years. Speaking with you briefly, I know that you are very kind of a driven individual. So I'm just curious. Take us to your thoughts in 2018 when you get this kind of recognition. Where a lot of times when people get a Hall of Fame kind of credentials, it's kind of like it's time to wrap up, and it's like. So I'm just wondering. Just take us back to this day. What were your thoughts when you get enshrined into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame? Kind of what were your thoughts this day, and what are your thoughts now?
Well, it was truly a monumental occurrence in my life. I mean, up there with birth of my kids and getting married, and all kinds of other wonderful things that have happened. I got to go back to when I got the call that I was even nominated for the Kurt Gowdy Award for Media, which is short of enshrinement, which is really meant for the players, the coaches, and teams. It's like the highest you can get as a media member at the Hall of Fame. And I was very honored. I was incredibly honored when John DeLeva from the Hall of Fame called me, and he said, Andy, you've been nominated for the Gowdy Award. I said, wow, that's incredible. And then I don't want to say I forgot about it, but I kind of seriously wrote it off, because only one photographer in the history of the Hall of Fame has ever gotten that award. And there's a guy named Rich Clarkson, who I think Rich has shot 55 Final Fours for the NCAA. I mean, incredible, amazing career and well deserving. And then I got the call a couple months later that I actually, I won the award. And they only give out 2 of them. There's one for electronic media, and there's one for print media. And I got the one for print media, and it was very surprising, but humbling, gratifying. And so when I was preparing my speech, I had to take all of those characteristics into account. I'm incredibly grateful. You can imagine walking up there, and that John DeLeva, who was the head of the Hall of Fame, hands me the trophy, and one of my colleagues has taken my picture, which I do every year of other people. And then I get up to the podium right here, and I look down, and every NBA executive that I know is looking right up at me. David Stern right in the middle, and he had a kind of a quizzical expression, as I remember, on his face, like, okay, now what do you got? Okay, good. And I was just filled with incredible gratitude. I have to say, I was so thankful to every single person in that room. I was thankful to all the mentors I had, my parents, my wife, and my kids, putting up with my crazy schedule in my life. Of course, the athletes, Kobe, top of the list, but people like Magic, who, as a young photographer, gave me a lot of confidence. Pat Riley, Phil Jackson, everyone who helped me along the way, Kyle. It was really an incredible experience. And you asked me about my reaction when John Leva called me and told me that I had won the award and was going to be given the award. I thought, well, now what? They're going to fire me? Because I said, first of all, I'm still alive, and second of all, I'm still working. So that, I don't know if those 2 things work in my favor or not, but I got over that pretty quickly. And the capper to the entire thing was that Adam Silver, who had just become commissioner, they had the NBA put a private cocktail party together for myself and Rick Welts and a couple of other people who had won awards, had gotten awards that year, 2018, from the NBA. And Adam took me aside and he congratulated me, of course. He said, Andy, but I have to tell you, I think your best pictures are in front of you. Right. And, you think about it. I mean, he's the ultimate boss. He's like the boss of the boss. Yep. And for him, it was very empowering, actually, to think wow, okay, I guess they're going to want me around for a while now.
Yeah.
And it was a simple thing to say. And I don't know if he had really thought about how impactful that would be on me and motivating me for the rest of my career, but it really was. It was a wonderful moment. I can't really put it into words well enough, I guess, to describe. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's like the end piece to a career. It's not, but it's, for me at least, but it's a very significant recognition from the people that I've worked with, worked around, worked for, for my entire career. It's beautiful. And the award is given for a media person who has had significant contributions to the game of basketball. That's what it's from the great Kurt Gowdy. It's in his honor. So all of that together was just a wonderful package of really amazing stuff.
And that's a perfect segue to my last picture here, which is you can't have the story of the NBA without your photography. And I asked you this question, what's your favorite photo? And you landed on this one. So just briefly, why is this your favorite photo?
Well, it's funny, Kyle, because I always say if I'm going to be remembered for one photo my entire career, I would hope it would be this one, because this has really achieved like sort of an iconic status over the years. It was such a crazy moment in the Bulls winning locker room, 91 in the Forum, tiny little locker room, chaos. I mean, I didn't even know what the next word above chaos is, but all hell's breaking loose in there. Champagne flying, and the network wants to do live interviews and the trophy presentation. And anyway, long story short, I had to jump on like a bridge table in the middle of the room just to be able to see stuff. And the network did the trophy presentation live to the whole team and the owner. They went to commercial, and then they were going to come back from commercial and do a one-on-one live interview with Michael. And during the commercial, no one could find Michael. They had the trophy presentation, then he took off. And so people were screaming and champagne's flying and nobody could find him. Where's Michael? And as I'm hearing all this, I just something in my head said, look to your left. I remember it like it was yesterday. There was a voice in my head said, look to your left. And I'm a little raised up and I looked to my left and he literally was maybe 4 feet away from me with his dad. You know, he's holding the trophy. All the emotions are coming out. Somehow Michael wanted to get a moment in that chaos to himself. And he found this locker and just buried himself in there. And I don't know how he had the presence of mind to do that. But, you know, I nailed this picture. I took like 2 frames of it. And then a producer came and like grabbed him, you know, for the interview. But it's funny because I'm thought of as an action photographer. You know, people think of my dunk photos and they think of my like Magic and Bird and, you know, Shaq and Kobe and stuff and on the court. But like my favorite photo that I'd want to be remembered for is a photojournalistic moment, which really goes back to my roots of being a photojournalist. I mean, this is a photo that like a news photographer would take, right? Flash on camera. There's no, you know, he's not jumping to the backboard. His tongue isn't hanging out. You know, this is a real news moment, and I pride myself on that. I love this photo, and you know, the end of the story in this photo was that, you know, his dad was murdered, and it was very tragic. Michael was very close to his dad, and a few months after the tragedy of his dad passing, I got a call from Michael's office that would I mind sending him a signed print, because Michael would like to hang that in his office. And you know, it gives me chills even now to think about that, because it was a beautiful gesture. The fact that he, you know, loved that photo as much as I do, so that's great.
Yeah, it's such an amazing shot, and it captures such an iconic. Just there's so, you know, they always say a picture's worth 1,000 words. I think it's not only worth 1,000 words, but 1,000 emotions, and kind of the story that you said with Michael now, and how he, you know, this picture means so much more to him. It's just such an iconic, just one snap, but you got it. And I think this picture says so much. One other thing I wanted to talk about, Andy, was you have so many great images that I've seen on the court or on the field or on the rink, so to speak. But my favorite pictures are the ones where you capture the behind the scenes, whether that's the post victory or it's Kobe with the 7 different ice packs on his knee and his shoulder and everything else when he's in year 20, you know, just grinding. So I guess open-ended question, but I think it's perfect for this audience, is whether it's sports, high elite achievers, people you've done business with, just, and yourself included. What's if I were to say this to you, the thing that all successful people in their career have in common is blank. What would you fill that sentence with?
I would say it's the first tenet, the first pillar of the Mamba mentality. It's got to be obsession. I mean, you have to be obsessed with what you do. Kobe had a great quote that if you're not as obsessed with what you do as with what I do, we don't speak the same language. And people gravitate towards people they speak the same language with. And I've found that I love being around people that are as obsessed with what they do as what I do. You know, he was a basketball player. I'm a photographer, but yet we have this bond. We had this bond very early on, probably from that first meeting on media day, where there was this like thing, like I could just see it in his eyes, and he probably saw it in me. Like, this guy's a little crazy. Like, I mean, like he's as crazy about what he does than what I do. And we had this running joke, Kobe and I, like who would get to the arena first? And I always got there first. I was always there. He thought he'd get there for 7:30 game at 2 o'clock. I was there at 1 o'clock. You know, if we were on the road, I would be at the arena at 10 in the morning for a 7:30 game. It didn't matter, you know. And so it was a fun thing. I've seen that with so many other people who've been successful in whatever area of life they are. You think about some of the great actors, the great writers, somebody like Peter Guber. I mean, he's just obsessed with greatness and wanting to get to the next level, and keep pushing yourself and never be complacent.
You know, there's and then the Kobe documentary that I think was originally on Showtime. He had this really good piece about like, what are you willing to give up? He's like, are you willing to? And there's several clips of him talking about, well, if I wake up at 4, start training at 4:30, over time, I am just going to exponentially train more than you are, and it's going to be a wrap, right? But essentially, a lot of different clips. It's really like, what are you willing to sacrifice? What's the cost? And I think any level of success, whether it's career, personal, there has to be some kind of trade-off. I guess for you, it seems like you have that brain too. Like you're willing to show up early, you're willing to do things maybe that others won't do. Just once again, thinking about if people want to take their career to the next level, what advice would you give about balance? Because that's always that's always something that comes up is work-life balance, and I need work-life balance. And you're a father, right? So like, how do you approach work-life balance? Because I know Kobe, you know, sadly, but one of the things that he did, from my understanding, is the helicopter.
Yeah.
Like he did that so he can have more time back with his family, so he didn't have the long commute with traffic.
Right.
So I guess for you, how do you approach work-life balance, having a successful career, but also trying to have success in your personal life as well?
Yeah, Kyle, that's $1 million question. I mean, I didn't really learn that till it was too late. You know, it, my I don't want to say it was too late, but I learned it too late in my career. You know, my business, you spend a lot of time on the road. You're in a lot of arenas. It's not conducive to family life, unfortunately. And I missed a lot of stuff when my older kids were little. I was a single dad for 7 or 8 years. That was a challenge, let's just say. Got through it. I think my kids and I are stronger for that. And you know, it's a crazy lifestyle that you're just thinking about the next game and the next photo and the next, you know, preparation, whatever you have to do. I wish I'd learned it earlier, quite frankly. I really do. My dad was pretty obsessed and kind of tunnel visioned, but I should have learned a little bit more from him, because my dad was able to turn it off every once in a while. And I just wasn't. I felt like I had to keep the engine running at 100 miles an hour all the time. So when I got a second chance, and I met my wife, we've been together now 17 years, and we combined our kids, our family together, and these kids grew up together, and we had a kid together who's now 15. And I really learned from the previous me how to be the best version of the new me. And I don't do it perfectly, but I do understand what work-life balance is now. I'm still as driven and obsessed as I've always been, but I know how to turn it off now when I really want to and need to. And that's something I lacked early in my career. I have to be honest with you about that.
Okay. I mean, that's such good advice too, as far as you can be driven, but try to find ways to be intentional with your time and turn it off, right? Because, and I think that's hard for individuals who have mindsets like you. And it seems like a lot of people who take their career to the next level, like it's probably a common trait that people have, and being able to turn it off, I think is key. You know, Andy, thanks for the time today. I have some final questions here, kind of more quick in nature. A morning or evening routine that's benefited you that you would share with others?
Well, I started going to the gym 3 times a week in my 40s. I kind of tailed off a little bit, but I'm back doing that now in my, I don't even want to say mid 60s, which I am. Exercise is really important. I'm not like crazy exercise nut, but I feel like I have a very physical job. It's just the nature of it. Just schlepping equipment around and carrying, big lenses and being on my feet a lot and traveling when I have to. So that's part of it. I've adopted a great meditation practice, which is, I don't do it a lot, but I do it when I actually really need it. I learned how to, there's a Zen term about coming back to, like Phil Jackson taught me, about coming back to your inner hum. Like when things are all like this and crazy, like just bringing yourself back with your breathing and closing your eyes. I mean, I have a photo in the Mamba book about Kobe meditating, literally meditating during the national anthem of an NBA Finals game. Like he is so somewhere else when all this chaos and pressure is going on. It's just incredible. Um, and Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. I love taking my daughter to school. She's on the cusp of learning how to drive, so I've been through that with my older kids, and I'm enjoying that. Almost every morning, I get to take her to school and pick her up, which most days I'm able to do that, which is great. And Yeah, it's pretty much it, man. Just taking care of my body, my mind, my spirit, and always being grateful. I walk in the arena, I'm like, wow, I'm really happy to be here. I mean, I'm grateful that I can still do this at my age. I don't do it
Yeah.
as much. I've had to pace myself, and I've, you know, ratcheted down the amount of games that I do out of necessity, but I still love what I do.
Yeah, and it shows. I mean, 40 plus year career, and you're still kicking butt. And I know there's a lot ahead. So I think those are good advice for people out there.
Thank
Final two questions here, Andy.
you.
You've mentioned some quotes earlier, but is there a favorite quote that you have?
Mm. Um, yeah, I mean, I have a good friend who, this is a cliche, but you just never take yourself too seriously. um, which goes back to what we were talking about, work-life balance and being able to turn it off when you have to. Um, the same friend has another great quote about never let anyone blow out your light unless you've given them permission, right?
Ooh, I like that.
Which is a pretty heavy statement, but that can be translated into any part of your life, your work life, your personal life. Um, a lot of us, I don't know, we sort of cower back, or we don't express ourselves or whatever, and it's keeping your own power. It's keeping you know your own self confidence. So those are a couple of quotes that come to mind right away.
No, I love it. And Andy, I'm going to get you on the final question we ask everybody, which this platform is all about helping people
Hmm.
take their career to the next level. And so for you, if you were to provide 3 tips to anybody who's, just wants to be on another level in their career, whatever that might look like for them, what's 3 tips you would provide to that individual?
Well, the first one would be tune out the noise. Don't be listening to the voice over here that's telling you can't do something, or the people over there who are trying to hold you back. So that's the first thing. The second thing is really just follow your dream. I mean, if your dream is to be in your job, or doctor, or what I do, just follow it, right? And the third thing, which Kobe was so instrumental with me, was never stop being curious. Never stop trying to learn more about what you do, where you want to get to. Kobe was famous about seeking out people that had equal levels of greatness that he had in other professions. Like he would just call like President Obama on the phone, or he'd call the great John Williams, the composer, and through that conversation, they won an Oscar together. But he wanted to always know like what made that person tick. And I'm always curious. So I'm curious all the time. And all kinds of things, but especially in my world, about how people have attained or become as great as they are. And I think those are 3 really important tenets to keep yourself moving forward.
Yeah, there is a scene on Ted Lasso, and I don't think I got this 100% right, but it was like, be curious and not judgmental, right? And I think when you lean into curiosity, that's where you open up opportunities versus
Right.
just saying black is black, white is white, and just
Right.
lean more into that curiosity. And I think, Andy, you represent that. I think your success shows. So just thank you for taking the time today for chatting with us. I know I found this beneficial. I know our audience will, but thanks again, Andy, for taking the time.
Oh, so great, Kyle. I'm glad that, first of all, I'm glad that we met. And you asked me to do this because it was such an enjoyable conversation. And thank you, man. I hope it was insightful and maybe somebody got something out of it, but I appreciate you asking me to do it.
Awesome, Andy. Thanks again. Have a good day, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Okay, Kyle. Thank you.
Check out more episodes at thenextlevelcareers.com.